Alright guys, the time is finally here that we're going to be putting on cylinder head. We've gone ahead and we've cleaned the top of the block with Kim wipes, and we'll be double checking that. We've cleaned the cylinder head. The heads were done by a local machine shop, and we're going to be installing bank number 1 today. So we finally made it to this point after a lot of interesting stuff going on with the pistons. We're also going to be installing the ARP cylinder head bolts. These are, extra strength. Probably don't need it, but it wasn't that much more money than the regular bolts. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and start installing these bolts. They're a little bit different than the other bolts, so don't follow along with what I'm doing exactly. Follow along with the Porsche manual. Yeah, we're gonna put that on. Finally. Alright, I just want to zoom over a few of these spots here. While it's not insignificant, the work being done here, it's not particularly difficult. Pretty straightforward in terms of the install, in terms of putting all the bolts in the right place. There is not a lot to really screw up in this part, even the heads and the camshafts. So in here you'll find me installing the front console, the water pump, the oil pump. Then I'm going to go on to the heads and install the head gasket and torque down all the head bolts. Install the lifters, the camshaft. I'll talk a little bit about that process. And once we kind of zoom over the things here and talk a little bit about the camshafts, you'll see the entire long block is complete. And it is actually a pretty long block. I don't know what the full measurements are. It's probably looks like close to 3.5 feet. So also I wanted to give a shout out to a podcast I did with Auto Amateur. I'll drop a link down at the bottom so that you guys can listen to even more yakking from me if you want to hear me talk even more. With James, he has a much better voice than I do. Fully admit that his podcast is quite entertaining, and as well as his videos on YouTube. So I'll drop a link down in the description if you want to check out the podcast, where we talk a little bit more about the car and what's happening with it. So, all right, I'll let you guys zoom through some of the guy in the background running around like a chicken with his head cut off. Hopefully you enjoy. Well, welcome back everybody. Now we're going to start on the valve train, and so just to recap, we've installed the heads on both sides of the engine here. So we've got some of the long block attached. The heads have been torqued down. I've gotten myself into another situation here of not knowing what I'm doing, and so now we're going on to installing the camshafts. And what's going on here is just like I had forgotten to, or didn't know, to remove the flywheel pulley before disassembling or trying to split the case. I did not pull off the VarioCam adjuster here off the camshaft. So now I'm left to figure out, because I got to get this part off to install and do the timing correctly. You'll notice here I haven't pulled the plastic off, but we've got both camshafts, the lifter carrier. I've got the lifters over here in this box, nicely categorized and where they go. So really it's just a matter of cleaning off these parts and getting them installed in the block here. Well, really before we continue here, I got to get this off. So I'm using a wrench here, but I actually do have the tool. I did buy the tool for that. Actually found it here. So this is the tool that goes on the end here. It's got this little spinny bit. Again, this tool wasn't expensive. You know, on Amazon it was like, again, like the piston install tools, this was $50 along with all the little pieces and parts to get these camshafts aligned. The camshaft timing is critical, obviously, to the engine functioning properly, and so I didn't skimp out on those tools. I did skimp out on the gasket installation tools. I watched a few videos about installing some of these front and back gaskets. I went out to the local hardware store and got these caps, which really the Porsche tool for this is just to push the gasket into the right place. So I went out and I got two matching, basically PVC piping tools, and we're going to try and make these work. I just would rather spend $3 putting in these gaskets than I don't know, whatever, 50, 70, 100, 150 to get these tools to install the gasket. And all it is just pushing the gasket into place. That's it. Try these. I've seen it done on other videos. That's why I'm trying it this way. So we're gonna show that too. But right now we're going on with the valve train here. So this is me trying to figure out how to get this VarioCam off. So let's try and do that. This is a 16 millimeter and a regular adjustable wrench. I'll show you the pieces and parts once they're off, but this is just me attempting to get this off because this bolt is on there really tightly. So this bolt here is what holds on the sprocket. Now we can pull this sprocket off. This is what does the VarioCam Plus adjustments. And I did a little reading just because I'm interested in how this camshaft works. If you can see, there is essentially two different lobe surfaces for each valve. What it has been described as a street cam and a race cam all built into one. So I find these pieces of technology interesting in terms of engine building. If you're interested in engine building, that's really, it's all about, as the engine's turning over and these valves are lifting and closing, how much clearance does the valve have as it's spinning around? And at what RPM does the valve start to open up more and close more? And these two lobes are obviously going to come into play when it needs more gas and air flowing into the cylinder. And this lower lobe comes into play when it needs less clearance. This is at a lower start or a lower RPM. I believe this is so that it will pass emissions a little bit easier, but still have the horsepower that you expect out of the engine. A lot of interesting technology going on here. In addition to the sprocket, as it goes on here, this sprocket allows the computer, basically, again, I'm an amateur here, but allows the computer to adjust where these are hitting in the timing sequence based on its own calculations as to what will be optimal. So again, VarioCam allows the engine to, essentially produce the most amount of torque and horsepower at each peak and valley of the RPM cycle. If you ever watch one of the measurement sequences for the horsepower obviously builds up over time and in terms of the RPMs and revolutions per second. And this sprocket allows the computer to basically get the most amount of horsepower out of the engine by, basically adjusting at which point these tips hit the intake valves. And at different points in time, it's more advantageous, say, for the sprockets to be at this angle, and at different points in time, it's more advantageous to be a few degrees to that side. So that's how that VarioCam works. It's a pretty interesting camshaft, I think, if you're interested in camshaft technology. So you'll notice this is one valve, and the computer can tell it to use, basically this lobe or this lobe to do the height adjustment. And you'll see it on the intake. This is the intake shaft. You'll see it right on the intake that the valve itself basically determines which one of these, the valve has two valleys here. So it might ignore the top big one and just use the lower one at say a lower RPM output and use the larger one at a higher RPM output. I don't know if that was boring for you guys, but I thought it was interesting. But now we have these apart and we can start building out the valve train. I'm gonna clean up these parts a little bit and start putting them in the engine. So it basically works through oil pressure and some sender units that we're gonna put in that kind of allow oil to vary through electronic means where this cam is putting pressure and going back and forth. So, and if I got any of that wrong, I'm sorry. This is just what I read and what I understood. Another important piece of this as an amateur, this bearing here, which is a plain bearing, needs to be replaced on an engine rebuild. So I'm replacing this. Again, this bolt is also needs replacement when you rebuild the engine. It's a stretch bolt, meaning you apply an initial torque. Anytime you see an initial torque and then a torque angle, that means the bolt stretches, meaning the bolt actually grows in length as you torque it down. So this torque bolt is, I guess, has a history of coming loose and causing the cam to get out of alignment and smack into the cylinders, and well, we don't want that. So we're replacing the bolt, we're replacing the plain bearing here, but we're keeping camshafts and the other pieces and parts as they are. I'll show you the lifters in 1 second and you know how to check for those, the exhaust lifters and the intake lifters. But we're going to get these cleaned up and we're going to get new gaskets on them. And we're going to start installing them on the engine. So, well, that's the next step. So we're going to do that and we're going to get started on the valve train installation. And once the valve train is done, well, we're in good shape, you know. Like, that's a pretty big mountain to climb, especially for an amateur. Climbing the piston installation and valve train mountain is where we're at in this project. So I'm gonna set you down over here and we're gonna get you, kind of a first-hand view of lots of my mistakes. Well, hey everybody. Today we're going to be doing the camshaft installs. Just a few notes for when you're taking this apart and putting it back together. These specific parts and the camshafts, and basically every part here, has a specific position. So if you just took all these out and just threw them in a bag and took all these out and threw them in a bag, that's probably not that good. It's not terrible because there are markings on here that indicate where these go. They're very specific. This obviously can't go anywhere else but here, but these look like they can go anywhere. They mark them with letters and numbers to indicate which head they go on, so this number has to match down here to what's written on the head. You can't really see it that well, but this number has to match the head. These are all match sets along with the cams. And even these little lifters here, they say have to be in the same spot you took them out of, else they wear very fast if you start switching these around, just the lifters themselves. So all the lifters have been put in the same place as before. I'm going to go ahead and lubricate those. We're going to install the front or the intake shaft. These back two pieces do not have caps on them. They are actually locked down by the cam cover itself, and the cam cover also is specific to this. So if any of these pieces are missing or go broken or have some damage on them, you might be in trouble. The lifters are okay to replace, I believe. These pieces are not. The cam covers and the heads are a match set. So if you damage those, you're looking at a new head potentially. I suppose you can go and try and find just that one piece and bring it in, but from what I heard, that's pretty much a bad idea. And this is the part of the engine that gets, besides the cylinders, this is part of the engine that gets the most intense wear as it's moving through its revolutions. So not something you really want to mess around with. That's it. We're going to go and lube these up and put them into place. It's important that you replace some of the parts here, and the manual will kind of go over that. The manual is not super good at doing this alignment. I'm following along with the video that Jake Raby puts out, because otherwise this is a lot of stuff going on at once. I would not be able to figure it out. All right, so I'm just gonna move on with the next procedures. I'm not gonna, detail every little nuance of what's going on here because I'm just not that up on how this goes together, so I can't give advice on it either. The other thing is you need to make sure that the chain is out of the way and not bound up on the sprockets down below, or it won't reach over these sprockets that are about to go in place. We're going to put high pressure assembly grease as opposed to the regular oil that we've been using on these valves, just for extra protection. All right, now we're going to get started.